This
Hello,
conference will
everyone.
now be recorded.
Hello, everyone. This is Casey Farmer and Alessia Simmons from the Alameda County Complete Count Committee. And we're going to dive right into our webinar overviewing the Outreach Grant RFP.
Awesome, great. So the objective of this webinar is to explain the grant funding available for organizations to conduct census outreach to hard-to-count communities in Alameda County. First, we will provide an overview of what is at stake for Alameda County in this census. Then we will review our strategic plan and how we plan to overcome the serious barriers we have to full participation with help from the community. Then we will discuss the RFP, and you will be able to submit questions to me via email at alessia.simmons@acgov.org. Okay, so what is at stake for Census 2020 in Alameda County? Well, Alameda County receives about 60% of its revenue from state and federal resources. Each person missed in the count equates to about $1,000 lost per person per year for 10 years. Additionally, there are thousands of residents in Alameda County who are historically hard to count, including communities of color, those with limited English proficiency, people with disabilities, immigrants and refugees, seniors, LGBTQ residents, children aged 0 to 5, and people experiencing homelessness. Our hard to count community makes up about 26% of our county population. That means if only 6% of Alameda County residents are undercounted, our community would lose $1 billion over 10 years. So as you can see, literally billions of dollars are at stake with the 2020 census. Additionally, the census is mandated by our U.S. Constitution. We have to do a count of every single person in the country every 10 years. And this data are used to determine our allotment of seats in Congress for our state, as well as in redistricting. And it determines critical funding that comes to our community for a multitude of community benefits and infrastructure projects, etc. As you can see, the stakes are high for Alameda County in Census 2020, and this is why the Board of Supervisors allocated funding for outreach grants and putting our team together, and we plan to use all of the funding that we have from Alameda County to invest in our trusted messengers in Alameda County. So in terms of timeline, as you can see from this timeline, we are currently in our planning phase. Our RFP was posted last week, and we are expecting to make announcements on grantees in early September. The application is due on August 16th at 5 p.m. This is a time for your organizations to develop your plans for leading census outreach. Early next year, we will be in the awareness phase where your organizations are implementing your plans and letting your communities know that you are a resource for census support. Starting March 12th is the activation phase. That means that the census is live. By this time, we would like for participants to know what to expect with the census, know that your organizations can be a resource for census taking and census education, and also to answer any questions and provide in-language support. Through our work with our subcommittees, we developed an outreach framework to equip and prepare our trusted messengers to lead census outreach. There are 4 components to this work, to our framework. First is direct outreach. So through our subcommittees, it was determined that we need to do targeted census outreach directly to our communities through our trusted messengers. Organizations can conduct direct outreach in the methods most suited for their clients and in multiple languages. Census ambassadors will regularly report on their outreach to the Alameda County office, and we, the Alameda County Census Office, will track and monitor progress for the entire county. Methods of direct outreach include conducting questionnaire assistance centers that are ongoing at a set location or scheduled for one-time events or workshops. You can also do educational outreach. Incorporate your outreach into existing programming, such as during regular intake procedures or food giveaways, etc. You can also do outreach through Adopt a Block or youth public service announcement contests that we plan to host. And this is the area that the RFP is meant to fund, direct community outreach. Our next component of our outreach framework involves our communication strategy. So our office plans to craft key census messages for trusted messengers to then share with through their existing channels of communication and through their existing communications platforms. If you are an ambassador, i.e. if you are receiving funds from Alameda County or doing any kind of outreach through our office, you are also committing to share at least four of these messages with your communities. These are meant to inform the community of why the census is important, where questionnaire assistance centers are located, and where to direct questions. Additionally, channels where these messages can be shared through are through newsletters, either print or online, on all social media platforms, through text messages, on your website, and really anywhere else that you communicate with your communities. We are also going to provide for trainings. So all census ambassadors, if you're receiving grant funding from us or volunteering through our office even, you'll be required to attend a training in early next year from about January through March of 2020. A Train the Trainer program will also be available for representatives from an organization to bring that training back to their teams. In these trainings, we will sort of train you on how to provide a census overview, walk someone through the form, train you on how to host a questionnaire assistance center, how to host a workshop, and how to host a census week, particularly if you're working in education or if you're a faith organization, etc. We are also committed to providing you with materials. Through our subcommittees, we really learned that we need to be providing clear and concise messages and materials and tools to our community. So we have committed to providing these to our ambassadors who can then share them with communities, and they will be available in all of the 57 languages that we speak in Alameda County. Content for these materials is being informed through our subcommittees and then created by our office, and will be made available through our website. Some materials will also be customizable, where you'll be able to put your logo and possibly tailor the content to be most relevant to your community. Our partners will be equipped to lead outreach with training and marketing collateral as well, including handouts such as how-to guides and flyer templates. You'll be provided with presentations, videos, have access to our frequently asked questions, and also be outfitted with county branded t-shirts and I'm Counted stickers. So that is our outreach framework. All right, and so now our Executive Director, Casey Farmer, is going to dive deep into details regarding the grant funding itself.
All right. So the grants are available between $5,000 and $50,000. And we are seeking to fund organizations who can demonstrate that they can conduct census education and outreach to our hard-to-count communities. Wanted to let you know that this is not the application for mini grants, $3,000 and below. That process will start on September 16th. It is a separate RFP process, and if you intend to apply for the mini grants, that's a shorter application and requires less paperwork and is designed for smaller projects in scale. So applications for this RFP for grants ranging between $5,000 and $50,000 need to specify the particular hard-to-count population or populations that you'll be targeting in your outreach. And as we mentioned on the previous slide, our county census office is providing the messages and materials to you. So we're seeking to fund organizations who can execute the census education and outreach. And as a side note, if you're interested or available in supporting the development of such materials, we invite all members of the public to attend our subcommittee meetings where we are currently discussing materials and messaging. It is not a requirement in order to receive these grant funds, but everyone is welcome to join us and lift up the best practices and ideas from their communities that they serve. The calendar section of our website has the full list of our upcoming meetings at acgov.org/census 2020. For example, we have the Affordable Housing Subcommittee tomorrow, the Immigrants Subcommittee next week, and a number of others. And we welcome the public to join us. So as you're thinking about targeting the hard-to-count population that you seek to do census outreach for, there's really two ways of approaching this. One, you can look at this geographically, where hard-to-count census tracts are in Alameda County. And we provided you this link to the California hard-to-count census map. It's interactive. You can look at each tract for the reasons why it has been hard to count, how many people live in that census tract, and a little more valuable information. So we invite you to, if you're pursuing a more geographic approach, to really look at this map to better understand the community. We also understand that the nature of your work may be to serve hard-to-count populations outside of where they live, but where they access services or where they attend school or their house of worship, etc. So if you're approaching this model, we're looking in your application for you to clarify the hard-to-count populations you work with using some sort of statistics or data points. For example, perhaps all of your clients receive food stamps or are on Medi-Cal, and thus you know that they are all low income, because those are to be eligible for those programs, you have to prove that you are low income. Or for example, you could state that 75% of your clients are under age 5 or over age 65. Or you could say the majority of our congregation has limited English proficiency and speaks, insert the language in your application. So again, this slide is simply to acknowledge that some of the work can be done very geographically, depending on the type of outreach you intend to do, or if these are services that you're providing at your sites, that it's acceptable to do it without utilizing this map and looking at the population, the demographic groups of folks who are hard to count. And we have them listed here. And so I'll just quickly read them. Foreign-born residents or immigrants, people of color, young children, renters or frequent movers, people with limited English proficiency, low-income households, people experiencing homelessness, large or overcrowded households, senior citizens, people without high school degrees, people with disabilities, or households without a computer or internet access. Now we're going to talk about the types of outreach that this grant is available to fund. First, for field outreach, this means when you're promoting, educating, or doing direct outreach to a targeted hard-to-count population to increase awareness and ensure participation on Census 2020, such as hosting events, adopting a block, adopting a building, or doing canvassing. Next, we have questionnaire assistance centers. So this is when you're serving as a hub for people to come to the site, or have a mobile questionnaire assistance center where people can get assistance in understanding what the questionnaire is asking of them, actually completing the census form, and really creating the access point for individuals who may not have a computer, who may need assistance in completing the form. And the next type is language access. And this is where you're really targeting the language needs of a specific community and ensuring that things are translated, interpreted, and accessible to that language group. And just to clarify on this last slide, it is acceptable for groups to do a variety of this type of outreach, one or all three. In terms of eligibility, all applicants need to have a 501c3 designation or a fiscal sponsor, or they can be a governmental agency. They'll need to provide us a W-9 form or be a current vendor with the County of Alameda. They will need to serve hard-to-count communities in the county, not necessarily headquartered here, but just some proof or evidence that they have a track record of serving Alameda County residents who are considered hard to count. The application will ask you for a project plan in the question section, and will also ask you for a budget. There's a budget worksheet on the website, and an explanation of your previous work with hard to count community members. And we also want to indicate that organizations should not discriminate based on race, color, national origin, citizenship status, creed, religion, religious affiliation, age, gender, marital status, sexual orientation, gender identity, disability, veteran status, or any other protected status under applicable law. In terms of our criteria, I ask you to refer to page 3 on the RFP, where there is a rubric showing 100 points available on the application. And what you need to be cognizant of here is that we're seeking to fund projects whose outreach plan and activities really align with the county census outreach framework. And in terms of the measures of performance, we are looking for projects whose outreach will yield census completion. That means trying to maximize the number of people who will complete the census by way of this outreach that we are funding. The outreach needs to target the hardest to count census tracts, and we point you to, again, the California hard to count map. And you can look at the regions in the darkest red, which means that they score 69 points or above on the California hard to count index score. And I think we should take a moment to take you there, if you can just bear with us for a moment. So this is on the California Complete Count website.
Let's turn on screen sharing, because right now it was only sharing the PowerPoint.
Mm.
I think it's good. It's good?
I don't know.
Okay, entire screen. Perfect. Great.
All right, so if you go to the census.ca.gov/HTC-map, you will come to this page, which provides you, which if you click on, it opens up to an interactive map where you can zoom in on the census tracts that you are interested in supporting. And the darkest of red sections, as you can see on the right side here, score above 69 points on the hard to count census tract map. And so if we zoom in on somewhere in Alameda County, oh, looks we've got one. You can see that this one scores 88 on the hard to counts index. And it provides you the 3 reasons why it scores so high. These are a lot of households receiving public assistance, many crowded units, and many non-high school graduates. So that is how we utilize this map, and just to emphasize that we're looking to support these of our hardest to count census tracts. All right, so back to we were on evaluation criteria. Pardon us for the jumping around there. I wanted you to be familiar with that map. So the timeline for the grants is between September 1st. We intend to notify organizations that they will be receiving funds at the beginning of September, and then we will be requiring the final grant report at the end of July of next year. So the timeline needs to be focused within there, and we already referenced the timeline, but there is a large just general education phase in this fall. It's fall 2019, generating awareness in January to March of next year. And then once the census becomes live, which is March 12th of next year, that is when we are focusing on our motivation. We're activating people to participate in the census through July of 2020, or concentrated within that window. In terms of evaluation criteria, we're also looking at an organization's capacity, its staff, its leadership, other projects it is underway conducting, and showing that it has an established track record, particularly in that hard-to-count community. In terms of grantee requirements, this is clearly laid out on page 4 of the RFP with a number of checkboxes. Under trainings, you will see that there are 2 required trainings. First, we will have a grantee orientation in September or October. We expect this to be approximately 2 hours, and the date has not yet been scheduled, but we plan to give you at least 2 weeks notice from the date that you are notified of receiving funds. The purpose of this orientation is to further develop the grantee's outreach plan and for our office to provide you updates that could be previews of available materials, upcoming dates for trainings for the next round of trainings, and making sure that you have what you need in order to further flesh out your plans. We also will be having the census outreach trainings. This is where you will learn how to help someone through the census form itself and other very important but fundamental skills. And those will range between January and March of 2020. And we will offer them many times in many locations throughout the county. We can also provide a train the trainers model, which is where a staff member from your team would come to our training and then be able to provide that training to the entire staff. And we can also come to your offices to provide that training. So that is the training. Those are the required trainings. It's an orientation in the fall and at least 1 outreach training for one of your staff in between January and March prior to the census outreach being underway. We are requiring all grantees to be census messengers, as Alessia mentioned earlier, and you've heard from us before. We want to tap into your existing communications channels, such as social media and newsletters. We will provide you the content so that your team doesn't have to do any research on this. They will be provided in multiple languages, and you can tweak them as you like, but they will have very specific key census messages, such as the census starts next week, or here is a census questionnaire assistance center in your community, or a reminder, it's not too late to take the census. We will also require grantees to use informational materials either provided by the county, the Census Bureau, the state of California, or an approved nonprofit who's created great materials that might be really tailored towards your community group. There's lots of nonprofits out there doing good message testing and developing great information. So if it's most relevant to your organization to promote those materials, we will provide a bank of approved materials for you all to use from there. For example, First Five of California has developed some very great materials for the 0 to 5 population, and we'll really be relying on those materials for all of our 0 to 5 preschools and childcare centers because it's a great tool. And so again, these materials will be made available to you all, and we can also print the materials for you and provide those to you at the training. We will require grantees to provide language access. Some of you may be focusing your project specifically around language access, and some of you may not. So for those of you who are not focused on language access, we still want you to ensure that anyone that comes to your center seeking support, you can at least point them to this list of materials available in at least 57 languages, the ones spoken in Alameda County. So we want you to ensure that you'll provide language access in some way, shape, or form. And we also need our grantees to track their progress. The intention here is for us to know that we are making progress in our outreach. We are seeking for this to be quantitative in nature, and that the tool that we provide to you to mark your progress be simple and technologically friendly for you all to use on a regular basis. And that is to be determined. We are not trying to make this an onerous process, but we hope simply to help you all track your own progress, help you work towards the metrics that you've applied for in your application, you've been approved for when you are granted the funds by the county, and all that tracking would then be available for you to use in your final reports. The progress over time is really quantitative in nature, not qualitative, but it ensures that we can troubleshoot on the go and not wait until the census is done to identify any challenges. The timeline is also available on page 4. The next phase that we're in right now is to submit any questions that you have about the RFP to alessia.simmons@acgov.org, and we will provide responses to all questions we've received. We'll post those online, as well as to email them out to anyone who has inquired about anything about the RFP. So those will be out no later than August 1st, but questions need to be submitted by July 26th. The RFP itself is due on August 16th at 5 p.m., and late applications will not be considered. We intend to award the grants in early September 2019, followed by our grantee orientation in September and October. And as I mentioned, final reports will be due at the end of July. And these are just some reminders of other important phases of outreach that we'll be going through between when the grantee would receive funding and when the final reports would be due. So we appreciate you for joining this webinar to get more information. We look forward to receiving your questions and answering them thoroughly. So please submit questions to alessia.simmons@acgov.org by July 26th, and we will post those responses and answers by August 1st. Thank you so much.